Hello, welcome to the July 13th, 2021 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test, make sure everything is going through as expected, and we'll get started momentarily. All right, audio sounds fine on my end. Let me know if you via email, if my audio drops off, you could email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. Occasionally does that, so I don't want to do a long part of the live stream with no audio. But my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America as a product specialist, primarily focusing on Steinberg products. And I'll be the host for the live stream. I'm based just outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. So if you're watching this live, please feel free to go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us who you are and where you're from. And if this is your first time attending a live stream, make sure that you let us know that as well. So you can ask questions in two different ways. We could enter it in the live chat field or submit a question in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. And as so we could do that. We'll try to go through each of the questions chronologically, and we will try to answer them as completely and succinctly as possible. Occasionally, I may lose as my chat field gets behind the live chat. I may occasionally lose questions. If I've lost questions, I'll try to periodically give a heads up as to when the questions were asked in the during the live stream, just as a barometer so people could see, just get a sense of where I am in the time. So I'll try to do that periodically. But since I may not be able to answer your question directly immediately, if we could try to refrain from asking the same question over and over again, that would be helpful because it just kind of slows down the whole process. And also, when you're asking a question, if you could indicate which version of Cubase and which operating system that you're running. So you can say, I'm running Cubase, 10.5 Elements on Windows 10, or I'm running, Cubase Pro on Mac OS Big Sur. That information would be helpful to have as well. So let's go ahead and just give a shout out to a couple people that do some wonderful work that I just wanted to recognize. We will have all the topics that will be covered in the index, covered in the live stream today, in a time-stamped index that will be pinned to the top of the comments field, so you could quickly read through all the questions. So I'll go through and get that done later tonight. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com, and Jan from Stockholm is kind enough to compile that site for us. In addition to all the official Steinberg resources, another wonderful collection of Steinberg-oriented resources that you could take advantage of is the Cubase Nation Discord. And Jazz Dude is who's on the live stream does a lot of work in compiling all that wonderful resource of information. And we have two people that serve as moderators, so sometimes helping people out often, or doing a little bit of moderation when needed. We usually have a great crew of attendees. But we'll give a quick shout out to Agent K and to Jazz Dude, who do some of the moderation. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay. Okay, so I saw a question kind of before we got started of how to do kind of a more like how to program a heavy metal drum pattern. Let me just get my chat field set up here. Bear with me just a second. Okay, so let's take a look at if we wanted to just program kind of like a metal drum beat, and I haven't really listened to metal music in a long time, so I may have the worst drum beat in the world, so I'll apologize in advance. But we'll show you kind of some of the mechanics of it, and you could fix. So I just loaded up a quick Marco Miniman drum set, and this is an add-on to Groove Agent, which has all sorts of. So just kind of give you a sense of some of the sounds. So let's say if I just wanted to quickly program some of the particular sounds, what I could do, I will just, load up Groove Agent here, and I'll just start with programming, and then maybe I'll just kind of add some stuff in a drum editor. So let's say I will give myself a 1-bar count in, and I'll just hit record. And I'm just going to auto quantize just because I'm not a great keyboard player and my keyboard isn't really set up in a really good musical way to do the live stream, but let's go ahead and give it a shot. So I'll just come over here and just and it'll start if I actually have my computer keyboard going to the right computer. Sorry, I had to computer keyboard that shares multiple computers. So let's say I'll just start this. All right, so I will just kind of place this maybe at a slower tempo. So let's say we'll do 108. So, and then I'll just hit record. We'll have 4 measures as a count in, 4 beats rather. All right, let's say I didn't like that. I'll just do that recording again. So. All right, and I'll just kind of, and I have my MIDI record mode here set to merge so that as I record new parts, I can just come over here. And let's say I'll just put in some hi-hats maybe. All right, so I'll just kind of pop it out of record. And let's say if I want to do some quick drum, like maybe just do just a couple of like editing. Come over here, let's just paint in maybe some 16th notes in the drums here to kick. All right, and see if I have maybe a different snare sound. All right, and let's say I'll just kind of bring my hi-hats down. The velocity here. So let's say maybe if I wanted to make this more of a quick, let's try a faster tempo, like 144. So you can maybe just kind of do stuff like that. So, often what I will do, and I don't program beats a lot in my life anymore, but often what I would do is kind of start maybe with doing something, playing it in, and then maybe just kind of augmenting it directly with, being able to draw different stuff in like the drum editor. I find it's a very easy way to kind of just take care of different things like that. All right, so let's move on. All right, so you see a question. It's great to see Neurotic Nexus. So we have a question. I have Windows 8.1. I've upgraded from 11.2 to 11.3. Had many problems and wanted to go back. And I keep getting a message that I cannot install Cubase version 11 in my computer. Help. So I'm not sure if you have the 11.02 installer still, if you're doing that. So if you uninstall, I haven't tried to actually do this, but I would try to maybe uninstall version 11.03. This won't remove any of your content or samples or preferences. And then just if you have the download for 11.02 to reinstall that, I think you should be set with that. So it may be in your downloads folder. If you can't find an 11.02, I may have it on one of my computers still to download that you should be able to kind of install from. But you could reach out to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. But if you could perhaps give a little more information, this is from Barlev 5. All right, so we have a question in German. Sorry, my German, I don't understand German, but I think I did a quick Google Translate that it might be how to see, and maybe I think Jazz Dude is German. Maybe he could help translate. And this is, I think it was about seeing the count in the transport. So you may have to, if you wanted to see, so where to see the count in the transport. So we see these three little dots. If you kind of move that over, this would activate the metronome. So where you see the metronome just to the right of that, you can now activate the count in, and you could specify the number of measures for the count in, or if you wanted to also just do the click pattern, if you wanted to edit that, you could expose those different things. So a lot of things in the transport you may not be so aware of. You may have to just kind of expand it, and you could, I get this question a lot, like, how come I don't see rewind and fast forward? You could just expand those particular controls there. So, but if I just kind of did a quick typed it, pasted it into Google and did a translate. So let me know if I'm completely off base. Okay, you have a question. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to set the default position of pre-post slot on channels? Right now, mine's at 14th, and I'm pretty sure it was 6th. So let's see if I come over here to a new project without a template, and I'll add my audio track, and let's get to the insert. So I don't know of a way to set the default value. I know some people will start with a, with the inserts for pre and post fader. Let's see if I change this and if I add another audio track, what its settings. So I think it'll default to that state. I don't know of a way to change that. I'll take a quick look at preferences. I don't recall ever seeing one. But you could just simply start with a track preset if you wanted it to always be at a different position, or maybe start from a template, but I don't think that's a user savable setting. All right, great to see Matt Elliston on the live stream. All right, so we see Uno Momento from Finland, and Dallas LaRue. Great to see Ted Springman. We have Ted Springman, also Carlos from Colombia. Great to see all you guys again. And Sable Winters. It's always better when Sable's on the live stream. Okay, so we have a question. How to cut an event at hit point and align the resulting event to a beat. So let's go ahead and just find a quick drum loop where we get some hit points. Okay, so let's say I will have hit points here. All right, so let's say I have my hit points that look like this. So, you know, what you could do is just create slices. And now that it is sliced audio, it will go into like the part editor. And now you could just snap these if you wanted to directly to the beat. So let's say I'll just take snap on and off, and we'll set this to a particular beat, and now that's only going to snap to the bar. Or we could say I want to snap excuse me, to like a quantize value or to beat. So now if I wanted this to only go right on the beat, you could do that as well. So once you get to the hit points, I would choose just to actually create slices, and then you could reposition each of those things. You could also, another method is to just create warp markers, and then when you go to audio warp, you could choose to free warp, and then you can move different elements around freely as you want. So you could just move those. So if something is a little off, a little early, a little late, you know, the warp is a good technique for that as well. All right, we see Michael Pierce from outside London, and you watch the Spectral Layers live stream. All right, and we have Reggie Rock from Jersey. Thanks for joining us. All right, and we have Razol from Denmark. All right, so I just see from James Bond, just says, enable auto solo in selected lanes. So maybe this is like, I'll just pull up a quick comping example here. Okay, so let's say if I have all right, so I think there might be a preference. We could see if it'll do this under editing. I think it's found under project and mix consoles, enable solo on selected tracks. So let's see if this carries over to the lane as well. Doesn't look like it does. But if you want it to just solo, you know, like a selected lane here. So let's say if we have a lane, you know, an easy way of doing it is just to use the comp tool, which looks like the little hand, and clicking on the event, and that will solo that particular event without having to mute other events. And that's all you have to do. So while it's not the actual lane, you could just select the event, and that will basically only play the selected event and mute the other event. So let me know if that'll work for you. All right, so we have Marble Jam from Wisconsin, I believe, saying hello. Thanks for joining us. We have Christian D68 from France. All right, we have Trans 2020. All right, so we have a question. Hey, Greg, hope you're doing well. Is there a way in Cubase 11 Windows to draw pitch transposing automation over a piece of audio? So not directly over the piece of audio, but if you want it to, do that for a particular event, so let's say if I wanted to kind of have a more graphic mode of pitch bend, so it's not necessarily like automation per se. But what you can do is select the event and go to processes, and you'll see pitch shift. And when you do this, you'll see kind of just a static transposition that you could do. But there's also an envelope, and you can set a range of an octave. And here you could, say, okay, I want this to go down over, 4 semitones, and I want it to go up, and I need it to be just processed directly there. So it's not like automation data, but you could just kind of get a graphic representation, again, by going to audio, to processes, to pitch shift, and then click on the envelope tab. So a lot of people will miss that, and then that will just kind of do your pitch shifting, and you could undo that at any time. All right, great to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. All right, and I guess John Costigan and Tim Weinheimer. All right, so we have a question from Ted Springman. Are you attending NAMM in Nashville? So Yamaha's having a very small presence. Usually Yamaha will have the biggest booth at NAMM, but I'm not attending this year. There's only one person from Pro Audio who's showing some small portable PA stuff. So I think it's a very kind of smaller show. So I won't be at Summer NAMM this year. All right. So we see Brian from North Carolina checking in. Great to have you on the live stream. Okay, so we have a question. I'm thinking of getting an M1 chip Mac. Question is, will Steinberg be updating current version to work with M1, or is it more likely that we have to wait till Cubase 12? So currently, there's a lot of stuff in Cubase 11 that works with the M1. There's a lot of third-party components that may not work. So if you rely on a lot of VST2 plugins, you may not have full compatibility with that, and that may always be running in Rosetta mode. So there will always be, later versions will always have more implementation for M1 processors and later processors. But if you're relying on a lot of third-party VST2 plugins or rewire technology, the M1 may not be a great choice because some of those may not migrate to Apple Silicon. So. Okay, so we see Ted Springman just it's about Summer NAMM. So I saw Yamaha on a list of clients, but not Steinberg. So yeah, I think the whole NAMM show is going to be kind of not a typical NAMM show experience, but I'm glad that they're doing something. So my colleague who does more of the live sound and like PA systems in my group, John Schauer, he will be there. Okay, so we see Christoph Redding says, hi, Greg, and all you Cubasers. I want to say sorry I didn't introduce myself last time. I'm Christoph from Germany, drummer, producer, writer, arranger, back with Cubase after 18 years with a bunch of questions. That's great. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to helping you out to get back up to speed with your Cubase. Okay, so we see that Cal Richards has also got a new CC 121 that's finally coming in stock in the UK. All right, and we see Daryl from Oakland. Great to have you back on the live stream. Okay, so we see a question. Can I save a MIDI guitar riff to use to user preset so that I can drag and drop from my library later? Can I do the same if it consists of 2 MIDI tracks? So let's take a quick look at 2 MIDI tracks here. So if it's going out to a virtual instrument, we just add. Okay, so I'll take that and let me add another instrument track here. All right, so let's say if I do this, so I know that if it's going to a virtual instrument track and I want to save it to user presets, what you could do is just to come over here and let's export MIDI loops, and let's just give it a quick try here. I'm not sure if this will do multiple parts or just single parts. And let's come over here to the media bay. Okay, so let's say if we want to look for MIDI loops. Okay, so let's say if I just wanted to drag this out as 2 parts. I'll do a new project here. So it looks like you could do 1 part at a time. So the MIDI loop, you could have 1 single part. So you could do it just by exporting a MIDI loop. So that would recall the instrument with its settings and the content. But it looks like you may have to save them individually. Okay, so we have a question. Can I, so it says question, I put a sample bass note in sampler track and some chord on a chord track, and sampler track plays along with the chord. Fine, but how can I record the output of the sampler track? Okay, so let's say if I'll just come over here to, let's just create a quick, okay, so I'm going to come over here. Let's create a sampler track from that. So now I will come right over here. Okay. So it says put a bass note in a sample track and some chords on the chord track, and the sampler track plays along. So let's just say I will. So say I'll just record a quick bass part here. Let me just. So mostly just knee. All right, so say if I have this, and let's truncate it a little bit here, and I'll copy it a couple times, and we'll just add a quick chord track. So say we'll start in E, go to F sharp. Okay, so let's say now we'll have this track kind of follow the chord track. So when we look at all the notes here, you can see this, but so all right, so now what I want to do is to just to tell this particular track to follow the chords, and we could just say, okay, let's do mostly root notes. Now, when I tell it to follow the chords, I'll hit OK. Or we could just say scale. So now when we do this, we can see. Just take out a cycle, sorry. So you can see when we kind of look at this that it's actually just kind of following the different chord progressions as we do that. So now you just have the actual notes just kind of follow the particular, chords directly there. So let's say if we look at all of them, you can see that the notes have shifted up to go along to match the chord. So if I change this, let's say to a D, you'll see that those notes will just kind of shift accordingly. So it's that's kind of so that way you could see the effect of the chord track just on playing a sample bass part. So it says the track plays along with the chord. Fine. How can I record the output of the sampler track? So if you wanted to send this. You could say, okay, I want to send this. If you wanted to record the audio output of it, we could send it to a group. Let's add a stereo group. And now I want to add an audio track, and I want the group that I just created as the input. So we could play this audio. And let's go ahead and just record. So you could just take kind of the output of the sampler track. Let's just take this output here. So now this is being routed to the group, and I take this audio track and you could just record the output as audio if you wanted to do that as well. Okay, so we have a question. Can you please go through your favorite features of the score editor for a film composer? And is it possible to freely adjust the notated note starting position without affecting the MIDI playback? So if you wanted to, there is kind of a difference between a lot of times, my favorite thing is the ability to actually get a score done quickly. So if I wanted to, if something was played in, not in time, but was kind of correct musically. So let's say if I wanted to go to this bassoon part here, or I'll just find something a little more, let's say our violin part. So I could look at this in the score editor. So a couple of things that you could do is when you come over here to kind of the staff settings is you could say, the smallest note that I intended maybe was a 30-second note. Smallest rest was an 1/8 note rest. And you could kind of turn on different interpretive flags. You can set your keys here. So what you could do is a display quantize. So this won't actually move the particular notes, but you can now just kind of come right over here and very quickly just set up the display quantize. And these notes may technically be off or early in the performance, but we could quantize their their actual, we could quantize just the display without affecting, if something is a little ahead or behind the beat. One of the things that I really like is kind of this, like when we go to the note editing overlay, because a lot of times, let's say if we zoom in this, and I think this is introduced in Cubase 10.5 or 11, but as I wanted to just, activate kind of the note overlay, here we could actually just, if I wanted to just adjust the velocities within the score editor, so this note should be a little louder, or I wanted to notate, just, what the MIDI note duration is versus what the displayed note duration is. So you could have kind of different controls here kind of graphically within the particular notation part. So instead of having to toggle back and forth, it's like, okay, I just wanted to adjust the velocity of this particular note. So again, you could just kind of hover over it and adjust the note overlays directly here. And then that will give you a lot of different options for adjusting the actual duration, the length, the velocity, or just kind of, different note attributes right there. So that's probably my favorite thing. And, but just kind of how fast you can get stuff done is also really a wonderful thing as well. All right, so we see Sable Winters wants more people to hit the likes button. So if you have learned something new, or if you want the live streams, this is how we can continue to do the live streams, is people subscribing and people hitting the like button. So okay, so we have just a question. Can you show us what hit points, create slices, markers, regions, all those things are useful for? So we showed a little bit with the drum loop just a couple minutes ago. So let's say if we come here to this, one is to have the ability to, let's say, I'll just start from scratch here. All right, so let's say if I have this particular drum loop and we go to our hit points tab, once we come over here, so we could set our threshold, and this would allow you to, not include perhaps, like these little things, maybe the hi-hats you didn't want. But maybe if you wanted to adjust the threshold down, we could now include that. So now we could have pretty much for all of our different elements. So if I wanted to, let's say I wanted to apply the feel of this to another part, I could click on Create Groove. And this would now show up as a Groove Quantize preset directly here within my Quantize panel. So I could take different MIDI parts and apply the MIDI quantization directly to that. That's been derived from the timing of the hit points. When we wanted to also come over here, so we saw create slices. So if I come here, I can now say I wanted this to quantize without the groove, but I can set my quantize value here, let's say to 16th notes. And now I could just hit Q and that will quantize. So we may lose some of the groove. So you could do then just kind of, doing different quantize options. We could create markers at each of the hit points, and this may be good, not necessarily for drums, but if you have maybe a long recording and you want markers to appear, like it's, 20 minutes of silence and then something happened, 20 minutes of silence, you could have markers. So if you're doing editing, and maybe it's a more of a symphonic piece and you have recordings like a multi-track recording, you could just say, oh, this, I have a marker when the oboe comes in after 600 measures of rest. You could create events based on each of these. So now each of these are now events that have been sliced, as well as, let's come over back, undo that. To create warp markers, and then you could also create MIDI notes, and this is also often helpful, like if you have like a kick or a snare track, where you could just create MIDI notes and say, okay, every time that the kick track hits, we could create a MIDI note, and then we could use that for triggering other notes or samples in Groove Agent or other programs. All right, so we see, is Cubase IC Pro mobile app still compatible with Cubase 11 Pro? Yes, so it works with Cubase 11 Pro. So yes, no problems there. Another question: any plans for any remote control using Android/iOS app in future for Cubase? So I know that there's a lot of people that have different apps for Android. We currently don't have IC Pro. We had some compatibility issues earlier when they did it initially for Android. You may be able to find it still on the Amazon App Store, but it may not be supported. But I haven't heard of any plans for development on that for Android. I know the team just did tremendous amount of work getting Cubase for Android, so that was kind of a big undertaking, and I'm actually kind of running on my Galaxy phone, so it's pretty cool. So we may see more stuff coming. I haven't heard of anything. All right, so you see from James Bond, toe, maybe 2 velocity lanes of 2 channels in editor window. So if we wanted to, let's just go to a project here. So you have 1 velocity lane. So let's go ahead and just take a So if I wanted to look at, so you could have, if you wanted to see 2 velocity lanes, you could. These would be the same information. I kind of get sometimes questions when people want to, see multiple velocity lanes for like dealing with chords. And if you are in that situation, if you hold down, it's Command plus Shift. Command or Option plus Shift and just click on a note, you could adjust the velocity independently for particular notes. If it's more for drum editing, we could see 1 velocity lane here. And what we're able to do is any event that is selected, you see the velocity for the selected lane. So, and this could be very critical for changing velocities on hi-hats independently. So this way you could, see the velocities on just independent single drum lines, but we can't see multiple different velocity indicators unless you look at everything together. All right, so we see that Michael Teams has already started with the ice cream. All right, so we have a question. How to shift an audio event by a given seconds. So let's go ahead and all right, so there's maybe a couple ways. So let's say if I have a bunch of audio events and I wanted to separate them by a specific number or a space in time, I think if we go to Edit, there's a function for this. Might be under Function, Set Spacer between selected events. So I can say, let's do 1 second of space between all those events. So if you're just dealing with a number of different audio files that aren't necessarily time-based, but you need to have multiple files within one particular project. So again, go to Edit, to Functions, and Set Spacer between events. You could also just set a project logical editor. So if you say, okay, I want it to take this media, let's say our container type equals event, and we could choose position, and let's add, and let's choose 1 second. So now anytime for my selected event, I could just move, and I could also just say property is event is selected. So I could say let's move all only selected events over by 1 millisecond, or we could choose to subtract by 1 millisecond, or PPQ, or specific time value. So now I could just come right over here and I could just do stuff like that as well using the Project Logical editor. And I think if you have this grid set up, so let's say we have our grid set up and we have these on the bar, that I could also just hold down, I think it's Control or Command plus the left and right arrows to nudge events based on the grid. So if I wanted to switch my master timeline to seconds, so now I could just move events over by 1 second. So that's Control or Command plus the left and right arrows as well. And that will kind of follow the grid settings that you have. Okay, so we see question. Groove Agent 5 is in my Cubase 11 is not working. It's fully licensed, and I tried uninstalling, removing, and reinstalling, but nothing. It says it has expired or not located. What should I do? So sometimes, there is just some confusion because you get Groove Agent 5 SE with the program. So I'll just come over here. So there's Groove Agent 5 SE that comes with the program. And there's also a Groove Agent, like a full version. So let's say if I wanted to come here, and this is one that's sold separately or is part of the Absolute collection. So this gives you more features, like, having 4 independent agents as opposed to a single agent. So if you could let us know if it's the full version of Groove Agent or if it's the SE version. So sometimes people may download the full Groove Agent 5 thinking that they're licensed for it when they have just a license for Groove Agent SE5 that comes with Cubase. So if you could let us know if you purchased Groove Agent 5 separately, either by itself or within the Absolute collection, that would be helpful information. Okay. Hi, Greg. Let's say I have 10 instrument tracks with different sounds. While live playing, I would like to go to the different tracks via a note on my keyboard, C0 for track 1, D0 for track 2. How can I do this? So let's take a look. So if let's just kind of create this scenario, I'll revert this. Okay, so let's say if we have, okay, so, and you wanted to hit like one particular note to go to this particular track. So we could create, I think, a logical editor preset. So let's see if we could do it just with a generic remote control. So we'll come over here to our studio setup. Okay, so let's say I wanted to do just a learn, and I'll just do this particular note. Okay, so let's see if we go to... All right, so let's say if we do command, let's see if there's kind of a navigate function here. Okay, so I don't think we can do it through there, but let's say like I have this called drums 1. So I want to come over here. So we'll take a different approach. So we'll take drums 1, and I'm going to create a project logical editor preset. So this may be a bit involved. So let's say we want to select, let's see, name is equal to drums 1. Okay. And I will save this as drums 1. All right, and I want to kind of do the same thing for sub bass. And I'll save this as a preset. Okay, so I will just come over here, hit apply. Okay, so that looks like it worked. So I'll go to drums 1, select. All right, so that works. So we created just a project logical editor. And now I think we could go into the studio setup, and let's say I'll have that note for that particular, and a fader 2, I want to have, let's say, a different note. So I'm going to click on learn. Okay, so now we're going to come over here, say command. Let's see if we can find our project logical editor. So project logical preset, and I will all right, so we'll come over here and say drums 1 select, and now I want to come over here, command to process project logical editor, and we'll say for the next node it'll be sub bass. Sub bass select. Okay, so now I'll just do my generic remote, and then I could just simply hit those particular MIDI notes, and that would trigger the particular that would switch the sound. So set up I know this is probably a left-handed approach, but again, set up a project logical editor to say name is equal to whatever the name is you want. Save it as a preset by clicking on a little plus sign, then go into the generic remote, and at this point you could say assign your MIDI notes that you've assigned here. Go under device, command, and under channel category, process project logical editor, and select the preset right there. So. Okay, so we just see a question: how to make music more original. So it's really I'm not sure if Cubase is if it's more of a Cubase question or it's kind of a songwriting question. Uh, but if you try, I know some people will, if they're always kind of go from try to use maybe the chord track to come up with new chord suggestions. So there's a lot of people I find that will come over here to the chords and they will kind of do the same chord progressions over and over again, So let's say if you come over here, you can say, okay, we're going to do a C chord. And at this point, if we wanted to add chords, like let's say I'm going from C to G sharp, to A flat. So, maybe I wanted to do a passing chord. So I could come over here and go to the Chord Assistant and you could look at different suggestions based on kind of musical proximity, based on circle of fifths, or just a list of different, chord suggestions. So, oh, maybe do a B flat chord. Maybe you want to do that. So try different chord experimentations with harmonies, and that could help kind of be a bit more original, I think. All right, wonderful to see that Pablo has made the live stream. Michael Teams is very happy. Okay, so I have a question. In my Pro 11, my spectral layers is grayed out. How do I get it to open? So let's just drop a audio loop in here quickly. Okay, so it could be that when we go to your audio and you go to extensions, the spectral layers is grayed out until something is selected to do editing on spectral layers. So make sure that you have the event. So without the event selected, I go to audio and I can see my spectral layers grayed out. When an audio event is selected, then it will allow you to launch the editor. So sometimes functions of the program will need to have something actively selected for that to open. So if I go to an audio file, a lot of I can't open the score editor unless I'm in like a MIDI part, and then the score editor will become available. So make sure that you have an audio event selected. All right, so we have a question. It says this may be out of topic. Dual 27-inch or just one single 32-inch ultra-wide monitor for Cubase? Any suggestions? So I go back and forth. I have two 22 inches that I have for my personal computer. My work computer, I have a 27-inch. So I kind of go back and forth. I still like having two screens just from years of doing it. It's probably more habit. I think that Cubase can run, especially since we have the lower zone, that you could do a tremendous amount of work without having to necessarily have a separate screen for mixing. So I think it really could be kind of personal preference. I go back and forth all the time, and I don't have a problem kind of switching back and forth. So it could be just the ergonomics of your space, as well as because sometimes like people working with 5.1 have a hard time with the one single screen, and a lot of times like my 5.1 setup, I have the center channel between two monitors, so it gives me a little more flexibility. So a couple things to consider. Okay, so we just see, hi Greg from Tucson, Arizona. I'm having a problem with Cubase Pro 11, recognizing my Groove Agent Modern Jazz Essential packs as well as other packs using Mac. They show in Steinberg library. So make sure that, because sometimes, you have to purchase a lot of the extra content. I think the Modern Jazz Essentials is one that you would have to purchase separately. So there's a lot of people that may go into the Steinberg download assistant and just download additional content, but some of the content is, you get any of the content that you have here. So let's say if we go to the Steinberg download assistant, all right, so when you go to Cubase, this is all the content that you get with Cubase. So if you're going to, VST instrument sets, so let's say you go to modern, or Groove Agent kits and style. Sorry, I should have looked here. So if you get to Modern Jazz Essentials, so just because you can download it doesn't mean that you have a license for it. So if you could tell us if you have purchased the license for it, that would be helpful information. So let us know that. So we have a question from Sable Winters. So was the spectral layer stream recorded? So yeah, it was recorded. I was watching a little bit of it yesterday. So if you go to youtube.com/Steinberg, so look on the Steinberg YouTube channel, maybe, and as opposed to the Cubase specific YouTube channel, but you should see it there. Okay, so we have Blastique from Lagos, Nigeria. Thanks for joining us. And we have D335 guitar from Italy joining us. Thanks for joining. All right, and we see that Jay is also joined the live stream from Connecticut. All right, so we see Pablo giving congrats to Italy. I guess it's for winning the Euro Cup. So. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a key to be pressed while selecting a track, which then just solos it, but not as a general preference? So I think if you just come over here and, just hit S for solo. So let me just reread that. Is there a key to be pressed when selecting a track, which then just solos it? Yeah, so try just S, and that will just solo the selected track. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding. So we have a question. Please tell me what is the most cost-effective version of Cubase for semi-professionals. So it could really depend on your price point. So I think you have... Cubase Elements is like, and I could kind of quote like, $99. I think Cubase Artist is around $349. And there's also Cubase Pro, which is around $549. Again, this is in US dollars. I don't know how it maps, how it translates to other countries. So I apologize for that. So, but if, there is currently still a promotion going on. So, I would say if you consider yourself semi-professional, I would maybe go for Cubase Artist. And if you buy Cubase Artist now, with the current promotion, basically you get the Cubase Pro for the same cost. So I think that lasts through the end of the month. So, consider doing that. And I think with Cubase Pro, if you find yourself that you may consider, I see a lot of people with, using other programs that have to buy lots and lots and lots of plugins for kind of expected functionality. of their program, but with Cubase Pro, it has so much in it, like the tuning, the convolution reverb, the plugins that you may not have to buy. You could save a tremendous amount of money not having to buy those tools separately. All right, so we see, just find my play. Sorry about that. See, I have lots of questions in my future here coming up. All right, so I may have lost a couple questions. So I'm at 22 minutes in. So I'm at 1:22 p.m. So 22 minutes. That's where I'm at currently in the live stream. So, okay, so I don't think I lost any. I may have lost some. So as you see a question repeated. Okay, so I think I may have lost a couple questions. So I apologize for that. So I'm at, if you go back in the timeline, back to 1:22 p.m. in the timeline, so that's 22 minutes after. All right, so we have Greg, a question. Hi, Greg. I recorded a drum loop with no tempo data. Can you please show us how to get tempo data to the loop so you could sync the loop in musical mode? Thanks. Okay, so let's say I have just a generic drum loop here, and I just don't know what the tempo is of the loop. And if I play this loop with the metronome, all right, let me find something that's less annoying. Okay, so let's say I have this particular drum loop, but let's say I don't know what the BPM of it is. So when I play this with the metronome, okay, so let's say, we can see 100 drums, so it's probably 100 beats per minute, but let's say we don't know what the tempo is or something that we recorded. So, and I wanted to actually just listen to the actual file here. So I'm going to just listen to it and count the beats. So let's say 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 3, 3. So let's say we're just going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4. 4, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4, 6, 2, 3, 4, 7, 2, 3, 4, 8, 2, 3, 4. All right, so this is 8 measures in 4/4, so it's 32 beats. So if I wanted to, I could go to the beat calculator here, and we could say, okay, this is 32 beats, and it'll give me the actual tempo here. So we could at this point just say, okay, this is 108.84 beats per minute. So at that point, if I wanted to, I could just say, okay, let's put that at the selection start, and we could have that automatically kind of align to the grid. Now we could take this particular file, and if we go into your pool window under media, you could now see we're going to have this, and you could just enter in the tempo value here, place that into musical mode, and then that would automatically follow whatever tempo that you're in. So count the beats, go to the beat calculator, enter in the number of beats here, and at that point, it'll give you the value, enter it in the pool window found under media, and then place it into musical mode. then it will just kind of magically follow whatever tempo and tempo changes you have. Okay, so just the question, is Cubase working on any product for Afrobeats or Afrocentric products we can buy? So there's always lots of different content that's constantly available. So it seems like there's almost like one a week of different content sets that are available in addition to what comes with Cubase. So, so always kind of check all the different, loop contents, and there's many loop collections that will have lots of different genres such as Afro beats and for Afrocentric music. All right, so we have a question. Hi there. Can you show me how to record an audio track from the master channel in Artist? Because Render, it won't work if I use plugins on it. Please help me. Greetings from Holland. So let's say if I wanted to take, I'll revert this. So, once you get to kind of the master fader here, so let's say we take this and, we have our master fader, this is kind of the end of the signal line. So we can't really send it to another destination to print. Some people will create just a master, like a pre-master fader group here, and then send everything to that before it hits the master fader. But, I'm not sure if you have to actually enter it in a particular value, or if you want the file, just come over here to export to audio mixdown. And, we could say, okay, we're just going to do our stereo output. And we could just say create audio track. And what this will do is we're going to add this, let's say, to our queue. I'll say start queue export. And instead of, recording it, it's just going to take the file, export it, and place it directly into the project as our mixdown project. So see if you actually need to render it, or if you need to record an audio track from the master, or, because this is actually faster than real time. So, this is faster than recording it, just doing a quick render. So give that a try and let us know. All right, reading through different comments. So if you've learned something new, make sure that you hit the like button, and that if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that. And we do these live streams on Tuesdays and Fridays unless I have a conflict, but for the most part, we've been pretty good and consistent. All right, so we have a question. Is there a way to mix down MIDI from my Yamaha PSR to track faster? So, what you're going to have to do, the PSR is generating all of its own sounds. Probably the fastest way to do that is just to record it as audio directly into Cubase. So some people will do, one track at a time if you need a lot of flexibility, or if you need to have... or if you could just do a full stereo mix down, if you have everything kind of mixed with, MIDI CC7, your MIDI volume messages, that, at that point you could just capture it, add directly as audio. But, you may actually find that, some of the sounds that you could use inside of Cubase may sound very similar, since we are part of Yamaha. So, you may not have a huge advantage of working in the PSR versus a software instrument, which would give you a lot more flexibility. but there's not too much that Cubase could really do to speed up the process other than kind of a real-time record and print directly back into Cubase from your PSR. Okay, so we have a question. What's the best way to deal with SMPTE, markers, and changes in cues, starting points, and lengths without affecting other markers / cues? I think digital performer and sequencer chunks. Is it possible? So it's going to be slightly different. But what a lot of people will do, so one thing that, sometimes people will do is use kind of an arranger track. So let's say if I'm here, I could have, let's say this is going to be, so we could have different parts defined within a particular instrument, and we can change the order of how these play back, have them repeated however many times. But one of the things that people often miss is the ability to say, okay, I have all of these tracks, and now I just want to do, let's say a new version. And I think we could even do this. Let's see, I think we could do it with. So, that may be where you could have different events here. But if you wanted to kind of have them play back in non-linear, then you could just come over here, have different elements and have different arranger chains. So at that point, you could, work. So that's what a lot of our film composers will do is, they could have multiple cues as multiple versions. And when we get into even tempo and signature tracks, you could just come over here. Let's just draw in, let's say, some quick tempo changes here. So let's say we have tempo. We could have, multiple versions of marker tracks as well as tempo tracks. So at that point, you can say, okay, I just wanted to switch all these to version 1. And say, okay, now we'll just come back here. And you could just toggle back and forth between different track versions. I know it's slightly different conceptually, but I think you kind of get to the same place in the end. So I just see a comment from Neurotic Nexus, and it's great to have you on the live stream. Not sure if it's still the summer sale going on because you can get Pro for free. So yeah, so the summer sale I think is going on through August 1st, the Studio Weeks promotion. Okay, we have a question. Can you explain the process of how to connect my arranger keyboard to the DAW and what's the importance of an audio interface? So you could transfer your MIDI information from your arranger keyboard directly into your DAW. Many arranger keyboards actually, do all of the arpeggios and all the parts internally. So there's a good chance that those may not be transferred directly over as MIDI data. So while you play a chord part, it may kind of play back. Many of the arranger keyboards don't have the capability to pass that MIDI information on out of the MIDI port. So that's only done internally. So if you wanted to archive everything, you could do that in your arranger keyboard. And the importance of the audio interface is, most arranger keyboards won't allow you to record stuff like the audio from the arranger keyboard or to record a guitar or saxophone or a vocal. And the audio interface is going to allow you to connect an audio source such as your arranger keyboard or a microphone and to record that and integrate the MIDI information with the digital audio recording so that you can edit and be able to manipulate the two different, audio and MIDI simultaneously. All right, so we see Stefan saying, after 20 years with Logic, I purchased Cubase yesterday. I'm excited, not giving up, differentiating between styles into different DAWs. So welcome, Stefan, and we hope that we can help you along your way to becoming a Cubase user. And thanks for joining the live stream. Okay, so just see from Jay, says, hi, Greg. It seems that with the modular features of Nuendo/Cubase that may become even more popular with import-export of settings for users to trade settings from each other. And Dom Sagalis and Chris Selim are even friends in patches. There could be color change, themes, macros, logical editors, settings, making the software seem less daunting and more a shared experience. Please request. So many people could do that just by, sharing a profile. So, and, you can, people share all of those things, macros and logical editors constantly. So, we'll email it to their friend, or here's my macros. Some of them can be pretty personalized for workflow, but, I know, like at Hans Zimmer's camp, like everyone has the same keyboard shortcuts, and and it's so that wherever Hans is working, he knows that these particular keyboard shortcuts are going to be the same in anyone's rooms, and everyone there learns Hans's keyboard shortcuts, period. And it's just kind of how it is. So a lot of people do that already. So that's already happening. Okay, so we see, hey, I've been thinking for a while to hop on the Cubase train. Would you guys think Cubase also does a job regarding EDM production, working with loops, sound design? Certainly. So many of the top EDM producers, even if you want to get into, like Ian Kirkpatrick or Zed or Circuit, all those guys are doing stuff in Cubase constantly. So okay, so we have a question. Can you show, please, or make a video, how can I connect my MIDI controller and to control my VST? So it could really depend on the VST itself. So a lot of instruments, when you go to, let's say, we go to control an instrument, a lot of them you can right click and click on Learn CC and then move the particular. So I could just come here, learn CC, move a knob, and that will just control different parameters. Now, if your instrument doesn't do that, you could also go to quick controls, and we could set up quick controls right over here. So let's say we're just going to go... So as we do this, we can say VST quick controls, and we could assign your controller that has, let's say, 8, click on learn and just move the different knobs here. So you can say, okay, that's going to be, I click on learn, I move the knob, and it's just going to increment, the different controllers here. So I just assigned these. And any function in my VST, if it's not around, I could just activate the quick controls and click on learn, move the parameter. We'll select a slot, move the parameter, and then you could just kind of learn that particular parameter and have that assigned directly there. So I say, okay, I just want to do fine tuning on parameter 2, move that. So you click on the learn, and then, you could just come over here and assign those particular elements to quick controls. So that's how you could easily set it up. But look to see, like, if we come over here to retro log, for instance, I'll just add an instrument. And I want to control this particular parameter. I could learn CC, and so say I'll just come here, learn CC, and move the knob, and I'm controlling it just by that particular parameter right there on my controller. Okay, so I just see question. My plugins, waves, I'll say they can't be detected in Cubase. When I go to my mix channel, all those waves plugins have exclamation marks next to them. Anyway, I can resolve this. So generally, it's going to be, I think what you need to do, you could see if it's going to be showing up here in the VST plugin manager. So if you have, if they make sure that when they're listed here that you see that they're, if you have the option of running VST3 plugins in Wavelabs and or in VST3 plugins in Cubase. So if you have the choice, Waves comes in VST3, make sure that you're running the VST3 version, make sure that you're not running. So it could be that the VST3 version works, but the VST2 is block listed, or if you actually come over and, make sure that you have, that it's going to be the 30, that it's the 64-bit version installed as opposed to the 32-bit version. But you could check with Waves on that as well, but it should be fine. There's really not much to do, so make sure you're running VST3 and that you have the 64-bit version, and then you should be all good to go. We have lots of people obviously running Waves plugins. All right, we see according to Michael Teams that Pablo is famous. All right. All right, so we just see from Christoph just asking club Cubase at steinberg.de. Is it right? Yeah, that's the email address there you could send questions. Okay, so can you explain the process of how to connect to your Yamaha MX61/MX88 music synthesizer to the DAW, and what's the importance of the audio interface? So as we mentioned before, the audio interface is going to allow you to record the audio. So you have MIDI information, and that's often what is going to be transmitted from an MX61. So you could record and use that to record sounds from virtual instruments. But you could also, once you have a MIDI track, you could say, okay, I want to come over here to a MIDI track, and we add that. We could just say, okay, we're going to take the input from all MIDI inputs, and if you have the Yamaha USB MIDI driver, we could have that automatically we could have that automatically function as the input once it's installed, and we choose to route this to the Yamaha. This MIDI information, it doesn't record the sound, but it records exactly when these notes were pressed, how hard they were pressed with the velocity. And we can see kind of our music measure going across here in time. We could see our bars and beats. We could see the pitch indicated here. So if we wanted to look at it, we could just say, all we see here is like this note is longer than this note. This note is higher in pitch than this note. So this records the MIDI information, and this information gets sent out through the USB connection. That's the primary way that people can do it. You could also do it over a 5-pin DIN MIDI cable, but primarily over USB. It gets sent back to your Yamaha keyboard. The Yamaha keyboard generates the tone, and you may have to connect that to your audio interface if you want to use it as an external interface. If you don't, or connect it into a mixer or listen to it with your headphones. Okay, so we see question from Joseph from Nigeria. How do we really mix Groove Agent 5 to sound as live drums? So, you could definitely, there's a lot of things that you could do in Groove Agent 5. So let's say I just wanted to, one could be just, doing like a quick performance. So let's say I'll just program like worst drum program of all time. Here, I'll just do a new project. So, Groove Agent 5 can have two different modes of working. One could be kind of like an acoustic agent, and one could be more kind of like an MPC paradigm. So if I wanted to come over here, a couple things that you could do is say, okay, I'll just load up a quick pattern here or preset. So I'm going to go to one of the acoustic agents. I'll go to Forget the Past. It's one I use a lot. So we'll go ahead and, so I have this, and you want to, like, velocity can make a huge difference in realism. So how hard you hit the key. So if I just come here and hit it very soft, or hit it very, so using the dynamics, so you can have like, and let's say you redo, but let's say if I just wanted to program something here quickly, all right, so I'll just come over here into my, and if I use Groove Agent, I'm just going to use to create drum map from the instrument, so we could see our drum map. And let's say if I just wanted to program, start off with maybe kick, and we'll just do like world's worst drum program here. And let's say I just wanted to do like some different velocities. Like I wanted this to be like more like a stick drag. So if I just do that, that's not so interesting. But if I do kind of more, and let's say now I just want to put in some hi-hats. So I'll just, all right, and let's say I'll just slow my tempo down here. So let's say I just wanted to take every other velocity. And just doing that with the hi-hats can make a huge difference. Let's say that velocities I want to be, and then you could actually just come over here and say, now I just want to take that performance and let's add different swing values. So those are a couple things you could do to make stuff sound really very natural and very, let's say, sound like live drums. But also when you get into Groove Agent, if you don't want to program drums, if you just come to one of these, you'll also get a whole pattern pads of pre-done kits. So you can have intros, and you could have endings, drum fills, and main patterns. And these patterns, you could also just come over here and adjust the dynamics, or if you wanted to adjust the complexity. And I could say, okay, every 4 bars do a drum fill. So play a random drum fill. Or I want it to be like half time, or every measure just randomly play a different drum beat pattern, 1 or 2 levels of complexity up. So just the built-in tools that you have with Groove Agent for the patterns are also great tools for making it sound live. All right, in the chat, we're at 30 minutes into the questions. So just as a quick reference. All right, so we see Graham from Royal Wootton Bassett in the UK. Thanks for joining us. We missed you on Friday. All right, now Pablo's has his ice cream request for Michael Teams. Just reading through. Make sure I did. All right. Just reading through a great discussion. And again, if you've learned something new, make sure you hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that. All right, so we have a question about sends and buses. This might be mostly to aftermarket plugins. When you send a stereo track to a send, can it become mono by mistake if the plugin you send it to is set up for mono? So if you send it to a mono track, so with VST3 plugins, it will kind of automatically configure that, but you can, like, let's say if I take, my Groove Agent track here, and let's say this is just playing, and I send this to an effects send. So sometimes people can make the mistake of saying, okay, I'm going to add a reverb, but you could make the reverb mono. So now when I add the reverb, it's only going to come over here. So I'll just go to the audio channel and let's send it to the reverb. So as opposed to adding a stereo track, a stereo reverb effect. So you can add an effect channel even if it is a stereo plugin. So I'll add that. So I'll come back right over here. Let's go back to the audio characteristics. So that's a mono reverb, but we could also choose to have a stereo reverb. And some people, do that intentionally. But if the plugin that you're kind of instantiating on a particular track is fixed to being a specific channel width, such as this is going to be a mono plugin, you can never do it. It won't work in stereo, but most VST3 plugins will automatically adopt to the channel configurations, and we'll just change based on that. But make sure that when you go to add the effects in, that you have the configuration, because you could set that independently as well. Okay, so we just see, questions about, how to fix the Waves plugins, having an exclamation mark. So, you don't have to reinstall Cubase, just try reinstalling your Waves plugins. And again, make sure that when you do it, that you install only the VST3 and only the 64-bit. All right, so Jazz Dude wants people to smash the like button. So just as a reminder, don't do it twice, because if you do it twice, then it kind of takes your like away. Okay. All right, so I got 3 scoops of tuxedo ice cream from Michael Teams. Thank you, that's very generous. All right, so we have Captenergy Music. Thanks for joining. Great to see you in the live stream. See, Michael Pierce says, "Oh Lordy, I think we all learned something each session, which seems stupidly obvious after Greg shows us. Revelation of the week." So I learned it all probably in the same way. So we just see, when is Cubase going to be dongle free? Steinberg did say this was coming. Any updates? So no public announcements. I think, we'll see, I know that as soon as they have something to share, that they will. So, maybe it's coming with the next version. I haven't been briefed on all that stuff, but I know that the teams are all working very actively on a new license management system. So. Okay, so Pablo's crushed the like button. All right, so I just see what is exactly this bassoon. So I think maybe I had a bassoon part when we looked at the Schubert piece. So, and it's probably a condensed bassoon part. But if you're not familiar with what a bassoon is, it's a wind instrument. So it's a double reed. So I'll just go just all of them. So that's what a bassoon is. So, but maybe I'm misunderstanding a question, but. Okay, so we see from Luca, guys, I'm having trouble accessing the Steinberg page for Absolute 4. It loads, but then goes all white. So I'll take a quick look at it here. So it looks like it's working okay for me. So I just did a quick Google search for the Absolute. So check it out, see if it works. Maybe if anyone else is, or people could check and see if it is working for them. All right, so we have a question from Nicholas. Does expression maps only work with certain libraries, or can we map any library that has key switches? How do you set that up? So it will work with any library that has key switches, and you would just go to your MIDI menu and go to Node Expression Setup. And really all you had to do is you could add a sound slot, define what the remote key is, label the articulation so that you can see it. But it's all kind of done here, in the expression map setup. So, and then once you have that done, you could just save it as a preset. So you could do different key switches or what messages, whether it's going to be a program change or a control change. So it'll work with, basically anything, which is kind of the beauty of the expression maps. Okay, so we have a question. Can you show how to use proximity chords and chord pads if you are stuck on a progression? Okay, so let's come over here. I think I have a file, a project that may work for this. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. All right, so let's say. Okay, so let's say I'll just. Okay, so when we go to add, let's say if we wanted to look at chords, we could. So let's say we have this like our E major. But at this point, we could choose to show kind of the chord assistant. So let's say, okay, we're in E major. So here we could see, proximity. So this is our tonic key here. So these are the strongest harmonic chords. And then as we move farther out, these become less harmonically related. So an F major chord is not, that's. So as we move farther away, this could be, like a lot of times you're in E major, you don't think of going straight to an F major. Like it's not a typical chord progression, but, maybe. But I think even Peter Frampton's Show Me the Way is a good example where it goes to the major chord, a half step up from the original key. And then, when you get into circle of fifths at this point, you could just choose to see kind of your E chord. And as you go around, this would just kind of automatically go through, we say, okay, this is E chord. And you go through your circle of fifths as you do this. So you can say, okay, let's go through another. And circle of fifths is just kind of taking the fifth of the chord. So we go from E to B, B to F sharp, etc. So as we work with this, you kind of go around. And this is often used in kind of like jazz music. So you'll do like, you go around a circle of fifths, and then you maybe do a turnaround. And you get back to kind of like your home chord or your tonic chord. So those are a couple of things that you could do. And once you have these chord suggestions, you could just drag and drop them directly on. You could also just define the chords just like that as well. All right, great to see Jeff Zabelski able to join us. Okay, so we have a question from Sable Winters. Please demo MIDI mapping. So I assume this is for like controlling a particular instrument. So let's say if I wanted to come here. And I'll get to the editor. So now if you want to just right click and learn CC, at this point we could just map that particular. So I right click and learn CC, and then that parameter can just be controlled. Just kind of using the knobs on my controller. And if it's not available, you could always go to quick controls. And again, just, click on activate it here, click on learn and move the parameter. So we'll select a slot, and that's really kind of all you have to do with that. And you could assign it manually as well. Okay, so we see, would you be so kind to break down setup of monitor source in the control room? All right. Okay, so I think it's going to be here. So if we have multiple pairs of speakers, so often people, as they, grow their studio, they may get smaller speakers they start with, and like I've seen lots of people start with Yamaha HS5s, then go to HS7s or HS8s, and maybe they get a surround system set up. So we could, and a lot of times if you wanted to switch between different speakers, it could be problematic. I see people physically unplugging their audio interface cables to different cables are connected to the speaker. So if we have an audio interface with enough inputs and outputs, we could just add our speakers here. So I have, let's say in my case, I have Yamaha HS7s, I have JBLs, Genelecs. So I would say, if I had an 8-channel interface, outputs 1 and 2 go to my HS7s, my outputs 3 and 4 go to my JBLs, 5 and 6 go to my Genelecs, let's say. So instead of having a piece of hardware which will colorize the sound, I could just come right over here to the monitors, and I could just switch between the different monitors and send the signal from the output that's set up, configured for the Yamahas. And then if I wanted to listen to it on a JBLs, I click there, and then the signal goes not from the output going to that we defined for the Yamahas, but to the JBLs. So this allows you to just simply come right over here and switch between the different speaker configurations. Now, if this is closed, you could also just come over here and click on A, B, C, D, and you could switch between the 4 different monitors directly there as well. So just now when we do this, you may also say, okay, some of the monitors may have different volume levels, let's say. So if I click on the inserts, we could select each of the monitors, and at this point we could set, and I'll just come right over here, and we could click on this again, and we could set a volume level for each independent monitor. So let's say my HS7s are louder than my JBLs. So I could make the JBLs louder when I switch to it, so that when I switch between my different speakers, that these speakers can have the same relative volume level between the different speakers. So when I switch, it won't be the case of this speaker sounds better because it's louder. You could kind of basically, run a test tone and listen to the different loudness between the speakers and change that just again by going into the monitors, click on the monitor tab again if you don't have enough vertical space, and adjust the gain. Each of these monitors can also have their own plugins. So many people used to run like EQs on their Yamaha NS10s because they found like the tweeters to be a little harsh. People were often known to even put tissue paper over the tweeters to eliminate ear fatigue. So if you wanted to put an EQ or a compressor on a particular speaker, or if you needed to add gain, you could run up to 8 plugins per actual monitor that are going to be independent. So that's some of the monitor switching stuff that you could do in a control room. It's very powerful and could save you lots of money in hardware that ultimately colors your sound. All All right, so we have a question. Is LTB, as in Mid-X8, an obsolete technology, or is it incorporated into modern Steinberg interfaces? So the LTB stood for linear time base, and that would timestamp the MIDI before it was actually transmitted out. And that was kind of a very important thing at the time when dealing with external instruments. But one of the things that, both operating systems started to do MIDI timestamping. So it wasn't as relevant because the actual MIDI driver architecture for the particular for the particular MIDI the driver architecture from the operating system was kind of doing that. So we can think of LTB as kind of being a precursor to what the operating systems, it was kind of solving the problem that was created by the operating systems at that time. So it's not as relevant now, but if you had an older computer, running Windows 95, it would still be like a benefit having the LTB. And we don't see that technology incorporated with the modern Steinberg audio interfaces that have USB, because that utilizes the Yamaha USB MIDI driver architecture. All right, so I just see third band zither. I use a CMC TP slider in scroll mode to scroll through the project window, but it does nothing in the key editor window. Is there any way to initiate scrolling in the key editor window using the CMC TP? So I don't have a CMC TP connected. But if you want to email me, I could have one connected for Friday's live stream. So if you want to send me an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de. So I don't have them currently hooked up, but I have them in my work closet in my office, so I could get one connected and then but send me an email as just a reminder before the live stream, and I could get it out and see if we can get it going. Okay. I just see, okay, hi Greg. Question, can you show again this new tool in the score editor that you could change the velocity and length, but this time put the MIDI track in time-based mode? In my Nuendo 11 has problems, so let's go ahead and take a look at it. Okay, so let's say I'll look at this. All right, so let's say I have this track and I have my time base set to, okay, so I'm going to put it into linear mode. Okay. And I'll go to the overlay editor. So kind of doing it in my Cubase seems to be kind of functioning as expected. So let's say, so let me know if I'm doing something differently than you are. So, and I don't think there's any difference between Cubase and Nuendo in that regard. Okay. Okay, so I just see, all right, so we have Rob checking in from Montreal. Thanks. Okay, so let's see from James Bond, clarification of his earlier question about two velocity. I mean, can we edit two tracks at the same time? Okay, so I think if we come over here to preferences, okay, so I'm just going to uncheck under editors, editor content follows event selection. So let's say if I wanted to edit this track here, and let me edit this track. All right, so I can edit both of those tracks together. So even if I wanted to, you know, just come over here and let's edit. Let's say I'll switch to the velocity here on this particular track. So you can edit two tracks at the same time, but I think by default, we may see that in the preferences to do that, you may have to just uncheck editor content follows event selection, but you could definitely edit multiple parts at once. And another, so if you want to have them in separate editors, another way of kind of doing this pretty easily is just to select, you know, multiple parts and then go into your editor. And then you could actually just, and we could colorize based on, you know, the channel or the part. So let's say I will just come over here. So you could select kind of multiple parts and just say, okay, I wanted to see the acoustic guitar. Now I wanted to see, so you see in green here, or if you wanted to now just see in orange, the piano. So that's another way that you could do it. And again, just looking at velocity between the two different parts. If you wanted to just toggle, and you could do that with a keyboard shortcut as well. Okay, thanks for all the great comments. So we are at 52 minutes after the live stream started. So I'm answering questions from 1:52 p.m. Okay, so just see questions. Says when exporting a scene, I scored one instrument had a delay on export, so the file was late. The instrument was Spitfire Mass 2D patch. Using a negative track delay on the VST, no plugins. So, you know, check to see sometimes, you know, if the plugin itself has its own plugins, you know, sometimes some of the tracks that have effects on them may not be reporting the correct delay compensation. So you could, you know, so make sure if you have any plugins on that, you know, try to see if you have the delay, you know, try a quick test of just like quarter notes and see if you export that and, you know, see if that makes a difference, or if when you start adding effects or groups that will, that causes your delay time. So it's probably going to be maybe a plugin that's incorrectly reporting its latency. All right, so we have a question. Does Cubase got any live vocoder kind of VST plugin inside which transforms the vocal and the live while recording with respect to chord note played on MIDI keyboard? So, if you wanted to, let's say, I'll just take a quick project here. So there's not a traditional vocoder, but I think you might be able to, if you wanted to kind of play live, we could use the pitch correct plugin. So let's come over here under pitch shift, and we will come over here and say, let's set external MIDI note. And I'm going to add a MIDI track. And let's set the MIDI track output through our pitch correct VST plugin. So now all right. So let's just adjust our speed up here. So this way I'm just kind of playing the performance as I... So you could do some stuff like that for creative stuff. But so that way it doesn't necessarily follow the chord. It's going to be kind of monophonic based, but you could play a single note melody and come up with some interesting creative results that way. So check out the pitch correct plugin that's included, and just add once you instantiate that, set the scale to external, to external MIDI note. And at that point, add a MIDI track, set that output to the pitch correct plugin, and then you could start playing. So I also see further clarification from Chris Harrison on his Spitfire problem. Says, so the session plays great in the DAW, but when exporting, it has this problem. When I switched to constrained delay compensation, it sat in time, but deactivated other plugins. So it's going to be one of those plugins is causing the problem. So I think you could probably, just go through the plugin path, and you'll find a particular plugin that's causing the offset to react that way. Okay, question. Can Cubase 11 Pro show me the chords I'm playing as I play MIDI keys? I recently came back to recording within Cubase. I remember that being a thing, but I can't remember how to get it working. So let's say if I want it to go over here, let's go into... So we can see an info line and a status line. So we can see kind of the current chord display. So as we would play back our piano chord, you can see the chord, but this has to be, I think, on status line. So make sure that you go to the Windows setup and at the status line, and now you could, as you would just kind of play in, you could just see the chords. So, and if I just come here, and you could also just, do live input and check out the chords there. So just go to kind of the status line, and you could do that. And if you're really kind of lost on particular chords, you could come over here. If you don't know what chord it is, if you go to a chord track, and you could just say, go to the editor and say MIDI input, and it will define the chord for you as well that was played in. Okay, so we just see, hi Greg, I'm using Cubase 7, going to 11, best way to import shortcuts without hiccups. So probably the easiest way is just to, in your Cubase 7, some people forget this when you go to your key commands, is just to save a preset. And Cubase should automatically find that preset once it's been saved. So if a preset hasn't been saved, it'll just treat it like default chord. So just save your preset. And then if it's, like 99% of the time, that will translate it over if it's been saved as a preset. But you could always just, come over here, save it as a preset, and it's going to be going into your presets folder, either in your Mac preferences or your application data folder. And you'll have a presets folder for Cubase 7 and Cubase 11. And then if it doesn't, just manually copy it from the presets folder. And if you tell me which operating system you are on, if you can't get it, just email me to clubcubase@steinberg.de, and then I could tell you the exact location. All right, so we have a question. Can you import more than one video per project? You can have multiple videos in your project, but you can only have one video playing at a time. So see, Jeff Sabelsky's reading his Dorco Elements manual. He's 980 pages, and he's a 10th done so far. So that's good. If you keep reading manuals, you're going to put me out of work. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, just reading through comments. Okay, so we see how to erase overlapping audio clips in one click after slicing audio in the arrangement view. All right, so let's just say I have audio here, and let's say as they overlap, let's take my snap off here quickly. Okay, so say I overlap these and I want to get rid of them in one click. So if you just go to your audio menu here, you go to advanced and just choose delete overlaps. So as you do that, but there's also a preference in general that you could enable. So if you go to editing and it's just and choose delete overlaps as a preference. So at that point now, as we hover over, that would just delete the underlying data. So it's just a preference that you could turn on. And if you totally messed everything up, you can still, the underlying audio will still be present, and you could just still have it right there again. So just try going to preferences, to editing, and then just enable delete overlaps. Okay, so we see I sent some questions to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Will you have a look at them today, or shall I throw them bit by bit in the live chat? So you could always ask in the live chat. We'll see if we can get to it. But I know I had a couple of questions that were sent in that we'll get to towards the end. And just for those people who are following, I met 1 hour into questions. We have a lot of questions today, so I'll try to get through a bunch of questions. Thanks for all the great questions. If you learned something, make sure that you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. All right, we have a question. Is there a way to lock the track colors in the console window so that when I move the mouse across by accident on the color tab, I don't change it? So currently there isn't a way, to lock the colors. So, just just aim the mouse below when you're kind of navigating as opposed to here. But even here, you'd have to click the mouse. And let me just... So, but you physically kind of have to click to open up the color window. So just try. So there isn't a way that I know of to lock it, but just, just go below the name of the tracks and you could just navigate pretty freely and easily there. That's what I kind of aim for. Okay, we have a question. Hi, Greg. Can you speak about Very Audio? Thanks. Yes, let's take a look. Okay, I'll just revert this. So Very Audio is kind of a built-in graphic editing environment for like tuning, like non-polyphonic instruments. So something like a voice. So most people will use it for voice. You could use it for bass or saxophones as well. So once we're kind of in the editor, we can just come right over here to our Very Audio, and we could just click here and it'll do an analysis. And there's 2 different modes where you could say, okay, I want to show default smart controls or show all smart controls. I always go for the show all smart controls. And so if we wanted to do some quick tuning, so if I want to do something quick and dirty, I could select all the audio and just quantize the pitch. And for a lot of people, that will do most of the tuning that they would need. Some other functions that we could do is so that's the bottom center. The top center will allow us to take the selected segments, and these segments are created, and we could minimize the vibrato. So if I wanted to do vibrato and minimize it just on this one particular note, I could just go to the top center and we could get rid of all the vibrato. And that may sound like what a lot of people would think of as like a very processed auto-tuning type of tone. Now, many times you may want to adjust, like maybe where someone drifts flat at the end of a note. So we have this little diamond at the top center, and this would allow us to just kind of bring up, but only from that point. So if I wanted to move this diamond to here, I could go to the upper left-hand corner and I could say, let's just adjust that so that they're not quite scooping into the note. Now, sometimes when you're transitioning from notes to notes, you may not want to affect kind of the transitions of notes. And we see these little triangles in the upper section. And what this would allow us to do is we could straighten the vibrato without affecting the transition between those particular notes. Sometimes you're doing this and you may go, oh, this clip is just, this note, this syllable is too loud. You go to the bottom right-hand corner and you could adjust the volume of each segment. And in the lower left-hand corner, we could adjust kind of the formants. So all these are available in the sliders over here as well. But those are some very helpful things of getting your vocals tuned. If you want to have references, you could also just say, okay, I wanted to look at the piano part as a reference in directly here. So we see the MIDI editor kind of underlaid. so that if I wanted to move notes, I could move it to a pitch that is shared with the piano as well. So it's a quick kind of overview on Vari Audio. Sorry, I have my cable for my bass below. I keep stepping on periodically and creating hum and buzz. All right, so we have a question from Jeff Sabelski. Hi, Greg. With Dorco Elements, could you discuss the term flow and export or import variations share into Cubase 11 Pro is like multi-projects? What's the closest thing to a flow in Cubase? So what a flow is we could think of and Dorco is kind of unique in notation worlds where many times, if you have a multi-movement piece, each movement has to be its own particular project or document or file. So a flow is an independent piece of music. So imagine we were doing a multi-movement symphony. So I could do one project in Dorco that's the symphony, and I could have flow 1 is movement 1, movement 2 is flow 2, and I could have independent instrumentation. Flow 3 could be the third movement, and the finale could be flow 4. So I store one project, and it has 4 independent pieces of music. So there really isn't the same equivalent in Cubase because many people could have multiple movements all within one particular project. So it's kind of a unique workflow that's unique in notation programs that maybe isn't as needed in Cubase, depending upon, how you've organized your project. So. All right, let's just go through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. So I just see just from Rob, please ask the Steinberg gods to set up the download assistance to allow users to filter on what we actually own. Thank you. So yeah, sometimes they want to make it as easy as possible. So when you enter like a download access code, that takes you only to that particular section to download stuff. So while you can, it's kind of a balance between you want it to make it easy where it's not restrictive, but sometimes people can download applications they don't have licenses for, and so I would assume that people would hopefully think that that you don't get everything just because you could download it if you don't have particular licenses for it. But I know that they've had improvements, and part of the new license management system, this will be part of that. I'm sure just kind of make the whole process more streamlined for everyone. So we see from Scott Bogfoot, says, I don't know if this is a labor of love or a job for Greg, but these live chat YouTube help clinics is one of the Cubase's best features and unique selling points. I'm glad that they're helpful. So yeah, I do it as part of my work. And luckily, the person I report to, supports it. I think it's been really good and helpful for people. So I'm glad that you consider it one of the best features. We just want to make sure that everyone's kind of getting the most out of their particular products that they do own already. So hopefully we'll give you like a little free Christmas gift of a feature that maybe you didn't know. Okay. All right, so just find my space in the chat. Thanks for all the great questions. All right, just finding my spot. All right, so I may have lost some questions, so I apologize for that. But I think I saw a question about when upgrading to Hallian Sonic 3, does Hallian Sonic SE get replaced? So that if you have Hallian Sonic SE, that will still remain. You just have Hallian Sonic you have Hallian Sonic 3 and Hallian Sonic. You'll have both. So when you go to add an instrument, you'll have Hallian Sonic and Hallian Sonic SE. So one doesn't necessarily replace the other one. All right, so where I'm at in the questions is 1 hour and 27 minutes into the live stream, so 2:27 p.m. So sorry, there's lots of questions today. All right, so we see from Sable Winters, how is Pro free when upgrading to Artist? So if you have Cubase Artist, what the promotion is basically if you upgrade it to Cubase Artist, like an Artist license for the month of July is automatically turning into a Cubase Pro license. So that's if you look at the Steinberg Studio Weeks promotion that's going on for the month of July. So that's a wonderful promotion that's going on. So if you want to, save money in your Cubase investment, that's a great way to do it. So we see question, any way we can add specific metadata and export that, such as sample library and preset in the audio file, or even notes in the audio file properties. All right, so when you come over to, let's say, an audio file, we could do this in Media Bay. So there's lots of all right, so I'll just go to some audio file projects here. All right, and so now when I go to a particular audio file here, we can see a number of different metadata information. So, but this is kind of what is on by default. But if you wanted to come over here, you could see all of these different forms of metadata that could be added to the particular ones. And if you really needed to, you could actually create your own metadata. So you could say, okay, I want to do text and a display name, database name. So you could add your own metadata fields right here. So you can see, audio properties, MIDI properties, staff, plugin name. So you can put in your own metadata tags as well. Okay, so we just see from Scott Bogfoot, how would I know what Cubase 11 comes with and what is extra? Thanks for the help. So when you generally when you come over here, let's go to the Steinberg download assistant. So we'll just get this open here. So how to tell what comes with your product is, so here you would just enter your download access code and that would take you directly there. But go to if you have Cubase 11 Pro, go here and then everything that's in here is available to download for you. So this is all the components that are coming in Cubase. You see other things here, but you don't have access to those until you purchase a license for it. So you have your license for Cubase 11, and all you have to do is just, all of these come with your Cubase 11. If you have Cubase 11 Artist, this is all the functionality and all the content that comes with Cubase 11 Artist. So that's how you could tell what comes with your product. So I saw someone else mention that they just only downloaded what they bought. So that's a good rule of thumb. Okay, so we have question. By three Steinberg 8-channel and link through 100% analog mixer from both interfaces with ADAT, can break any equipment, or is 100% fine independent through a patch bay. So if you needed 24 channels of input, so I think you could still find some of the UR824s, and you could run one of the interfaces as your audio interface and run other ones as like an ADAT input and output into the primary interface. There's also the UR816Cs, and those will run directly as, and those will, I think, has 8 channels of analog, and you could run another one as 8 channels of digital connectivity through ADAT light pipe, so there's no problem with that. All right, and I also see continuation of that point. I want a full analog experience. So yeah, so you could definitely have your 24 ins and 24 outs, with the appropriate hardware. So. Okay, can you give a brief tutorial on Ambisonics in Cubase? So. Okay, so let's say if we wanted to do some, so Ambisonics is kind of an interesting surround format, but it's more kind of, we could think of it as more of an immersive audio format. So instead of being kind of channel based, it's going to be object based. So, when we had 5.1 or 7.1, we could think of those, we could pan stuff to specific channels, but Ambisonics can kind of decode based upon the number of channels, that are kind of present. So if we wanted to come over here, let's say we could double click. And if I wanted to have like the stream or the bird kind of move with you, you could just, kind of come directly here. And once we set up, we can add tracks, so we can add an audio track. Instead of it being like stereo 5.1, you could choose either first, second, or third order Ambisonics. So once that's done, and you have an Ambisonics track and you have an Ambisonics bus, we could now just start over here and say, okay, I want this stream. And you could kind of move the sound where it sounds as if it's behind you and rotating. And once we do this, we have it set up with the headphones, and we have the ambi decoder set up kind of in the phone's channel. So once we have that done, that will decode this so that we could listen to kind of our perceived spherical audio on normal headphones. All right, so we see from Jim Barclay, does Cubase plan on adding compatibility for the Roland Phantom where the controls of Cubase can be accessed and controlled on the Phantom's touchscreen like it does for MainStage and Logic? So it's generally, we don't set up control surfaces. So the companies that do control surfaces and MIDI controllers kind of do that, and there are Steinberg APIs to do that. So it's really, we tend not to always get Roland Phantoms in every controller keyboard, but we do have API programming languages so that those companies can do that. So that is widely available and used by most companies already. All right, so we just see when the dongle is going away. So they've announced that it will be, and they kind of gave everyone a long period, but they haven't made an official announcement. But, they're currently working on the new license management system. I don't know much about it, but as soon as I know something, I'll be able to share it with you guys. All right, so we see John Morales. Great to see you. Greg, can you only do Atmos mixing in Nuendo, or can you find a way in Cubase? So currently, with the current versions, it's only going to be set to be doing Atmos mixing in Nuendo. So things may change in the future, but that's how it is currently. We don't know. We'll see how the market goes. So. Okay, so I see a question about the metadata that we answered already. Okay. Okay, so I see from Daryl, a few months ago, I've recently purchased the Native Instruments Complete Control S88 Mark II, and I haven't thought of NKS support. Do some of these Steinberg VST instruments support NKS control? So I think it's really kind of, there's obviously a lot of people using the controller, but I don't think there's anything in the instrument that we specifically need to do. For NKS control, I think it's really up to, just like with the Roland, it's up to kind of the controller company to do stuff, but I'm not so, I don't have a NI controller. All right, reading through. Okay, so we have a question. Does Steinberg have a free ASIO driver that I can install on my laptop to work with Dorico Pro 3.5? I have ASIO on my desktop with the Focusrite Sapphire, which came with Focusrite. So when you get that, so you will get on the Windows, on the Mac side, you will see when you come over here to your audio system, you would just select built-in audio. On the Windows platform, all you have to do is to just select generic low latency ASIO, and that will communicate with your onboard audio interface with any of the Steinberg products like Dorico Pro or Cubase. Okay, so we have a question. How do you put something slightly off-grid in the drum editor? All right, let's see if I have a file I was thinking of. I'll just open it up. All right, so let's say, just create the drum map here quickly. All right, so, there's a number of different ways. So one is you could just, if you wanted to just turn snap off. So if you turn snap off, you can place drum notes kind of anywhere that you want. If you wanted to just switch like the master time here to seconds, you could choose to just kind of move based on, milliseconds. You could adjust kind of the timing position here. So, but basically if you just hit J, that will take the snap off, and that will allow you to kind of freely place stuff wherever you are. Or if you want it to snap to the grid, you just hit J or this icon here. And then you could toggle between the two different, whether you want it to be on a grid or whether you don't want it to be. All right, so we're currently an hour and 41 minutes into the questions. Sorry, we have so many questions today. And if you've learned something new, make sure you do hit the like button. So I just see from Thermonuclear War, I wonder why in music academies they work in Logic, Ableton, and Pro Tools and not with Cubase. And in his opinion, it's better. So we tend not to give away all of our programs, but we have lots of schools and colleges teaching in Cubase. See Graham Witcher's enjoying his CC 121 he recently got from Anderton's in the UK. Okay, so I'm seeing just a lot of the questions repeated a number of times. That just kind of slows the things down. So if we could try to refrain from doing that, it's always helpful to me to get through more questions. All right, so we have a question. Can you show how to color tracks in the edit page? I get confused when I want to change the folder color versus track color. Okay. Okay, so let's say if I want to change the folder color, I'll change it here. So now we could have our folder color. And then if we want to have track colors, if I wanted to change one track color at a time, I could just come like so. If I wanted to change multiple tracks, I could select those tracks, go to the color tool. So I'll select the color tool and then just switch to the selected track. So now just if I still have something else selected here. So then you could just kind of select the colors just like so, and it's still independent of the folder track. All right, so seeing a couple of people saying that the web page is going white. It's different pages from different people. So it seems like I'll just check like the vintage plugins real quick. And let me just... So it looks like it's fine. And I'll just look for Nuendo here real quick. It looks like the Nuendo page is white, so I'm not sure if there's... Looks like it was up. Yeah, it looks like, yeah, so that is, seems a little strange. I'll make sure to mention that to my German colleagues there. Okay. All right, so seeing an email from John Morales. Good to see you. I'll respond after the live stream. Hope you're doing well. All right, so we have a question. Sometimes I want to quantize an audio part, but in a quantize panel doesn't reveal the settings, and the audio part doesn't have markings for hit points even after setting them. Okay, so let's say if I wanted to just quantize this, let's say if I just go to like hit points. So one of the things that, you know, so let's come over here and okay, so we'll set our hit points. So I'm not sure if you, all right, so let's say if I just wanted to quantize these here, so sometimes, you know, what it could be is, you know, like if you have, let's say I've taken this file here and I've sliced it, you know, that now it will place it directly into an event, like, or I'm sorry, as a part as opposed to an event. So if you do that, then you could select all of the little parts and then just come over here Let's say when I hit Q, you can see that the effect changes it, but it could be maybe that you don't have all of the slices if they've been broken, if you split the based on the hit points. So try to make sure that you actually, select all of the different parts, and as you can see here in the part editor, and then you could try see if the Quantize works for you. Okay, so you could just see, is there a macro to populate my mix bus? Let's say a chain for mixing. Okay, so let's say if I'm in my mix console here, so there's probably just track presets. So it's not a macro necessarily, but if you come over here to presets, and let's say track presets, audio, and once you have these kind of set up, really all you have to do is just to, so let's say I have my input output channels here. So I could just come right over here and just drag and drop different track presets to it. So when we go to the audio channel, you could just come here. I'll just keep that on top so you could watch all the EQ and inserts and just drag. So it's not a macro necessarily that would automatically do that, but you could just take any track preset and just drag and drop right onto your master bus. So once you have everything kind of set up, just simply save it as a track preset, and then you could just drag and drop it right in very easily. Okay, so we see from Eric Ross, how can I set up so that when I zoom, it centers the zoom around the playhead, or center and zooms around the mouse pointer? Okay, so let's see if we're just going to revert this. I probably destroyed it. Okay, so let's say, let's say if I'm doing this, so if I do this, we can move the mouse playhead. But if you hold down, let's say the shift key, you could drop zoom without affecting the playhead position. So some people will just hit G and H, and that will keep the playhead position centered. But a lot of times people may kind of zoom like this, and as they let go, that the mouse position changes. So just try holding down the shift key. And then you could zoom this way without it affecting the playhead position. So give that a shot. All right, so I just see, will the dongle-free Cubase be available soon? So I'm sure that the teams are working on it, and they wanted to give everyone kind of a long notice warning because it is a pretty significant change. But I think as we get closer, as it gets closer, that we'll be learning more information. So. Okay, when I double click to edit a MIDI part, window mode, the focus goes to the start of the MIDI part instead of opening at the playhead current position. Can I change that? So let's take a look. And just as, all right. So just in terms of the questions, we're at 2 hours and 9 minutes into the live stream. All right, so let's say if I'm here, I'll put my cursor maybe at measure 17, double click, and then our cursor here is at measure 17. Okay, but let's see if I go to the transport, and if we have the use video follows edit mode enabled, and my cursor's at 17. So let's double click. So it looks like mine is staying right where it is. I've seen sometimes when you click on an event here, like with the edit follows play mode enabled under transport, that the cursor moves to the beginning. But it looks like in the MIDI editor that I'll move my playhead position to here. And let's say I rewind a little bit. So we're measure 20-ish, 21-ish. And now I'll double click and those are going to be in sync. So also one other setting is to link the project in lower zone centers. So you could see if that is set right here, this little chain, and that will be so that when you zoom in one, that it'll zoom in the others as opposed to having independent zooms. So, but it looks like the playhead positions are synchronized. But let me know if yours is different. I just see a comment. I have Cubase Pro 12 and want to desperately use without a dongle. So, well, Cubase 12 isn't out, so we're at Cubase 11. So, okay, so I just see what controls the sensitivity of the lower horizontal bar in the track window. It seems I can't really get finer control when I drag it left or right. All right, so let's say if I come here. So if you're using the mouse scroll wheel, so let's say if I'm navigating, I just kind of hover here, and I use the mouse scroll wheel, and if I hold down the shift key, that will slow it down. So this is without the shift key, and the shift key plus the scroll wheel will allow you to have kind of fine control. So not necessarily when you're dragging left or right, but maybe hover and use the mouse scroll wheel, and then you can get fine control with holding down the shift key. Okay, I think this is a question referring to seeing both two MIDI parts. Can you change the velocity expression on both channels then? So yeah, you could switch back and forth. So if I'm here and I have two parts selected, so I could just switch between the two different parts, and that will show you the velocity for that particular part. Okay, so I just see, can you explain pan laws on Cubase, specifically equal power? All right, so let's set up a quick test tone just to show this. right, just gonna check my. Okay, should be. Let's try a new project here real quick. Okay, and let me. Okay, so I'll go ahead and just turn this down. Okay, so we have a stereo track. And let's go ahead and just look at our metering. Okay, so let's say we have this as all right, so we'll just kind of look at the meter here. I will switch the pan law settings. All right, so that we could show this. So right now I have it set to equal power. So let's say I would do it to minus 3 dB. So now when I pan this stereo track, you could actually kind of see, like, as something is kind of panned to the left, you know, if it's panned kind of all the way, we could actually, you know, as we do the pan law settings, what equal power will do is if we think of like, okay, if we're going to basically double the volume, like if we double the volume of something, that's adding 3 dB to the volume level. So if we're taking, let's say, a pan law, let's do kind of maybe a combined panner here, and I bring that out, we can see that you'll see kind of like a 3 dB difference there in kind of the panning as you adjust the pan. So as with equal power, we're not going to have the actual volume change. I'll just switch it here. So let's say I go back to my balance panner. That when we pan, we're not with equal power, we're not going to have the level drop off as we pan to the left or to the right. So a lot of people use like the pan settings to get a wider sounding mix overall. So just, you know, but if you think about doubling an audio source will, you know, making something twice as loud as 3 dB. So that's combining, let's say, the left and right channels. So if you wanted to not drop off as you pan from left to right, then you could set it to equal power. And again, this is all done in the project setup. So if you want it to be equal power, 0 dB difference, you can have that set up right there. Okay, we have a question. Is it possible to bounce all FX tracks together like a mix FX? All right, so let's take let's say our drum loop here. Okay, so let's say I wanted to put so let's say I'll add effects channels here. So let's say I'll just go to my sends and I wanted to add a reverence, a reverb. Let's add a flanger, something really obvious. And let's add a delay. Okay, so this will sound really. All right, so now we have this going into these different effects. So if I wanted to go to mix down all of the effects, all you'd have to do is go to your audio mix down. And then let's see if we come here, and I think you could actually make, let's just, so if you wanted to, we could choose to do a multiple, and let's say just do our multiple effects channels and maybe a two-step process. So let's just say I'll do it as a WAV file. And then if I choose to import it into the project this time, that would be helpful. And then you could choose to mix down those files if you wanted to. So you could render them independently and then do a bounce selection, even just coming over here and doing a edit in render in place. And here you could choose to just mix down. Sorry, you could, so if you want to take those, once they've been rendered independently, go to your render settings and choose to mix down to one audio file. Okay, so we have Nicholas from Australia, since he's awake, laughing out loud. Is there a previous window shortcut? Let's take a look. So if you go to Windows, you can select next plugin window with a keyboard shortcut. It doesn't look like it's a previous, so it may just cycle you back and forth. But there is a select, there's a select next plugin window. But I don't think that there's keyboard shortcuts for that. So sorry about that. All right. Okay, reading through questions. So thanks for all the wonderful questions. If you learned something new, make sure you hit the like button. Okay, reading through more comments. See, Uno Momento still has his Cubase Score 3.0 dongle that was on the parallel port. So I remember I still have a bunch of those. All right, we have Wendell checking, who's from Brazil, joined us. Thanks. Okay, I just saw a question and I lost it, but before I forget, it was if you could have MIDI, if you can have the MIDI tracks not follow tempo changes, how to do that. So if we have MIDI tracks and you don't want it to follow tempo changes, all you have to do is set it, right on the track itself. So it's not necessarily the event, but on the track. You'll see musical mode and linear mode. Switch it to linear mode, and then that data on that track won't follow the tempo changes. Okay, so I think I found my spot. Okay, how can I change a wave to MIDI part? So if you have like a monophonic audio source, really, so let's say if I come here to like a bass line or to a vocal or a saxophone, all you have to do is go to Very Audio. So I will just come over here. Let's go to Very Audio. Have Cubase do the analysis of the audio file, and then under functions, say extract MIDI. And then you'll have your MIDI part extracted just from your audio. So it's not going to do chords, but it will do kind of monophonic audio. So we have a question. What would be the easiest way to get info like the key of a client's project from the audio? So, it's not there aren't any necessarily like particular tools for the key currently in Cubase to detect the key of an audio file. I mean, you could play along with it with MIDI. I see a lot of people will just kind of come over here to chord pads and we'll try out and audition different chord pads to find the key of the audio, but there isn't an automatic extraction process. All right, so we see Robbie Bowling from Dallas just arrived, probably a long time ago, but okay, so we have a question. Hello, I'm using Cubase 11. What is the easiest way to line up video that includes audio to my audio tracks? So when we do, so say when I import a video file, it's automatically going to extract the audio directly to Okay, so now let's say if I wanted to go into like different sound, so this will automatically. So I've extracted the
Society
directly the
and a thriving young
audio
adult
from the video here. So we have
community with many beautiful spots to enjoy.
that all done. So if we wanted to go to, let's say, laying in different sound effects and stuff like that, or different audio files. Let's say if I go to my favorites, I think I have. I can come over here. Let's. So any of these like little kind of sound effects stuff, let me just come over here. So say if I just kind of drag this in. Now, one of the cool things is once you have video that you could enable to use audio follows video mode, and then you could just kind of place any audio or MIDI part and have that align directly with the video like so. So you don't necessarily move the video, but you could have the audio as it's moved, or an event is moved, even when doing like a fade in, and have the video automatically reflect the changes as you move it. So I just see a question. I'm not sure if this is another part of the discussion, but can you have each output go to a headphone monitor mix to run submixes? So if you wanted to do headphone or Q mixes for a project, you could set that up in Cubase's control room. So if you get to the audio connections here, go to your control room, and then you could add different Q mixes. So let's come over here, say, okay, keys. And then we could take these outputs, from your audio interface directly from here. And then you could, in the control room, have your different headphone and Q mixes all set up through your mix console. So you could do kind of automated mixes for your headphone Q mixes. Okay, so we just see Daryl just saying, thanks for the feedback. The driver is Microsoft Drive. I don't like this driver. Far more comfortable with ASIO. So, so I think if you just set it to generic low latency, another little third-party tool that you could use for an ASIO driver for onboard audio interfaces of like PC laptops is ASIO and number 4 all, ASIO for all. So you could check that out. Okay, so we just see a question. All right. So the question is how to make Groove Agent stop playing the pattern when taking a pattern and put it on the timeline. All right, so let's come over here. Let's grab the pattern. So I don't think that there's an option or preference for that. So I think once we just once you click on it, it starts playing it just because it's clicked on. But let me see if there's... see if there's any preferences. So I think that's why it's initiating the pattern. Once it's clicked on, Yeah, but I don't. I think just because it's selected, when you select it here to drag it, that it will do that. So, but I don't know of a way to stop that. But I can see. I'll mention that. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, is there any way to change the tempo of an entire project by, say, 5 BPM if it contains audio and MIDI tracks? Obviously, I need to audio to maintain the pitch. Thank you. So, yeah, we'll show you how to do that. So, once you have the audio kind of in the project here, we'll just. So, MIDI does that without any problems, but I will just. So all of the audio files are recorded with kind of like a tempo stamp information. But if I just select all of my audio parts here and place them into musical mode while I play, and musical mode's enabled for all the events, I could just come right over here and say, okay, I want to be 120 beats a minute. It'll just, whatever the tempo is, 156. 88. So once you have those events in musical mode, they'll then follow the tempo changes. And you have to kind of, so once the file has been recorded in Cubase, it's automatically tempo stamped. So it knows what the tempo is and can react to being placed into musical mode correctly. Okay, so I just see a question from Daryl. It says, where can I find the ASIO for All as a download? So I think if you go to ASIOforall.com. So I just see a comment, except that Steinberg refuses to update the drivers for UR816C, so it won't run on modern Macs, just from Holland Oates. So the UR816 does run. The MR816 is a FireWire interface, so currently you need 3 adapters to even connect it to your Mac. So the MR816, but it has been discontinued over 10 years as well, so. You can also check with Mac OS and see why their compatibility changes so much from OS to OS as well. Okay, reading through more comments. And again, if you learned something, make sure that you hit the like button. All right, we see that Gareth has made the live stream. Great to see you on the live stream. Okay, so I just see a question. When I'm creating MIDI drum parts in Drum Editor, I can only see the MIDI notes of the drum part selected. Is there a way to always keep all MIDI notes viewable? All right, so let's say I have, just switch this over to Drum Editor right quick. So let's say, okay, so when I'm here, so if, okay, so now if I just hit like, so I see my drum editor here. So let's say now if I wanted to select, I'll just toggle the settings here. I'm going to select the event and let's open the drum editor. That now you can see all of the different events. So if you try selecting the track as opposed to just the event. So if I select the track and open the drum editor, I can see all the different drum editor events. And as I click on another one, I could just click right over here and you could activate, you know, the next parts and stuff like that. So try just to, you know, open a drum editor from the track as opposed to the event and see if that makes sense. All right, so a question, is there a function or a key to unselect everything? So I think there is a select none key command. I had to set this up for a macro for Stevie Wonder a couple years ago. So I think if we go to, yeah, so there's a select none function. I think that may be my keyboard shortcut that I did, but if you just go under edit, and you'll see select none. So try setting that up. I don't think that's maybe a standard Cubase shortcut. I may have added that in the previous live stream, but try just using the select none function. Hey, welcome to Sub 403. Glad you could join us. So we just see shift zoom. Can we get a preference preset for that, please? I'll pass it along. But now that you know the trick, it's pretty easy because you may want to just go back and forth between the two modes at different times. Okay, so a question from Eric Ross. How can I set up my mouse wheel to scrub or jog my playhead left and right on the timeline? All right, so let's say, okay, so let's come over here. So I think, you know, we have kind of like play mode that you could do. But if you wanted to also just do scrub, you could just do scrubbing directly. So you could switch the modes of the play tool to a scrub tool. So if you wanted to do that, and there's also different key commands that you could do under, I think it's shuttle play, maybe under transport. So, all right, so I have a couple of these. So shuttle play halftime. So, So now if I do this, I could do like halftime or backwards, just using keyboard shortcuts. So those are a couple of different ways to do that. All right, so we see Gareth has revealed the mystery of it was Doc from Back to the Future who's complaining about Cubase 12. Okay, so we see follow up to the MIDI editor question. So asking about the window to editor, not the lower zone. So if I double click, the edit opens a new window, doesn't focus on the current playhead position. All right, so let's go ahead and take a quick look. All right, I'm just gonna go to the transport. All right, and I'll just change my preference and try it again here. All right, so say I'm in measure 63. I now double click and it's measure 63. But let's go to our transport and see if the use video follows edit mode affects the behavior of that. So let's say my playhead is at 54. I double click. It's 54 there. So that seems to work for me. I'll try it on another project just to make sure. But that seems like it's all kind of working as expected. All right, so playhead is at measure 9. Double click. All right, playhead is still matching up for me. So let me know if I did something else different, Claude. All right, so we just see from Jeff Zabelski, is score innuendo exactly the same as score in Cubase 11 Pro? Thanks so much. Yeah, they're identical feature sets between the two. So. Okay, so we have a question. Hello, I have a question about the licensor. Dad used Cubase Elements with a band member. Now he's no longer in the band and would like to buy Cubase 10 Pro. Can problems with license occur? So if he has the license, like on his computer, he could choose to upgrade from there, and it just needs to see the license, but make sure that he has like access to the credentials to log in to his My Steinberg account. So as long as he get into the My Steinberg account and he physically has like the computer with the e-licenser, he shouldn't have any problems. All right, so we have Saeed, I think, checking in from Bangladesh. Thanks for joining us. All right, just lost my space. Let me see if I can get back. I saw a question from Joey Barron. All right, so we see, hey, Greg, can you explain if direct monitoring can change levels in device and when in tape machine monitoring turn on and off input? So, with the RME, I believe within the Total Mix software, you can adjust the levels for the direct monitoring. So, basically the direct monitoring sends the input signal directly to the output signal. And I think like if you have like the 3 mixer rows, maybe the middle mixer row, and I haven't worked with the RME hardware in a number of years. But I believe that you can alter the gain in the Total Mix software. So if you do have a gain discrepancy, it could, try to see if you could reset the Total Mix software, and that will probably, as long as everything's at 0 dB, I don't think it would adjust the gain structure. So I just see some of my reverb plugins of the DAW do not open. It says it is not licensed. What should I do? So if you could tell us exactly which DAW you have and which reverb plugins, that would that information is always helpful. So I know like Reverence, I think, is only in like Cubase Pro. So if you're running Cubase Elements, you may not be able to open up Reverence because it's not licensed for it. But if you have some more information, that would be helpful. All right, reading through comments. So thanks for all the great discussion. All right, so just seeing kind of a further question from Marcos. Maybe it says, if I buy 3 8-channel interfaces, can I use a full analog mixer linked to those interfaces, ADAT and P10? So, if it's a full analog mixer, you could go line level out of the mixer if your mixer has enough outs on it, and you could definitely feed the interfaces. So, as many, you could run, for every ADAT input at 48K or 44.1K sample rates, you get an additional 8 channels of ins and outs that you could expand with other audio interfaces or different converters. All right, so I know we had a couple questions. Let me get to those. Thanks for all the wonderful questions from everyone. Let's see before. Okay, so these are mailed in. Let me activate this. Okay, it says, hi, Greg. I'm an enthusiastic Cubase Pro Nuendo user since many years now. Nevertheless, I have a latency-related question for that I haven't found an answer to in the blogs yet. Would be great if you could help. In a simplified setup, I have an instrument track whose signal is fed via a group track into an audio track. In this way, any live interaction with the instrument can be directly recorded on the audio track, and insert effects on the audio track are not part of the recording, which I prefer as a trained audio engineer. So insert effects are not recorded on the audio track, but their latency is part of the recording in the sense that the waveform starts at a delayed time. Why is that? I know about constrained delay compensation, but this feels more like an approximation to the wanted solution. So it would be great if those latencies would be reflected in the actual recording at all. Is that possible? The solution should also work for more complex setup, many instrument group audio tracks. Thanks. Okay, so and this is from Henner. So I set up just a quick, let's say, a retro log track, and this retro log track has some different plugins on it. So let's come to the audio characteristics here. So let's say I have a multi-band compressor and a flanger. So if I play my instrument track, you can probably hear my controller that, no real latency, and I'm sending this instrument track to a group, and I could send this group, I could create an audio track, and this group is the input. So if I record, we could have, so I will go ahead and arm this track, and I'll record both MIDI and audio simultaneously here. So when we add plugins that have, so let's just go ahead and record. So say I come here, and I'll just take it off cycle record, sorry. So now if I just come right over here, I'll just hit record. We can see that, we could have, the MIDI and the audio lined up. Now, when we instantiate different virtual instruments or different plugins that have a lot of delay, when I hit this, it's going to get processed through a multi-band compressor. And this multi-band compressor is 123 milliseconds. So when I play, I can't, and it's reacting live. There's no way for Cubase to compensate other than to play it delayed. It's just physics. So if we record now, we could take a look at it, So at this point you go, okay, I have like the audio and MIDI are off between each other. So what I need to do is to, just not have those particular effects on the channel while I'm recording live. Now, if I played this, now when I play a MIDI recording, I could record it directly into the system. And because it knows where the MIDI events are occurring, it will do the delay compensation for you. So you could not record it live, but record it directly after and be able to have the audio. If one other thing is, let's say if on, we have our inserts. Let's say if I have my inserts on a particular track, so let's say I have these turned on, and I have this audio track selected, and I recorded it dry, and I want these inserts to be embedded. Another way of doing this is just doing a direct offline processing, and I could take this whole insert chain and just drop it on, and that would automatically process the same insert effects, and then you could choose to just come over here and bypass or just throw away the plugins, and you're taking the plugins that were on the channel that were causing the latency through the path, and then you could just drop them directly on the track itself. So there's nothing you can really do with the actual live input to affect the latency other than, if the plugin is causing that latency, that's what's going to happen. You're going to have that delay. Okay, so we have a question. So someone who's just started with Cubase. Okay, question or maybe future request to the next version of Cubase. As I told you before, I'm in Ableton about 3 years now, and I want to ask about group channels in Cubase. I know that you can put your tracks to the group, for example, but what difference between inside or outside function of the group? And for future requests, maybe it's impossible to do it like in Ableton, more simple. I mean, when you put the tracks into the group, it automatically putting to one folder bit it is as a group, and you can put the group to the group as well. It's more clean and visual. No, in Cubase, as I can understand, you need to send 2 tracks to group and then a group out to the folder. So can you explain these things, please? Thanks. Okay, so let's take a look. Let's say if I want to come here and let's say group my drums together. Okay, and in this case, I have them in a folder. So I think this is kind of about groups and folders. Okay. So let's say I have all of my groups. So if I want to take all of these selected tracks and assign them to a group, all I have to do is to right click and say add group channel to selected channels. Now we have this option here of folder setup, and I can see how the nomenclature could be confusing, and we have create inside folder or create outside folder. So in the folder that this is referring to is not a folder track that contains this, but we could think of create inside folder is going to put it into the group tracks folder. So the group tracks kind of have their own folder in the project window. And we think of create outside folder, that would place it below the selected track. So I'm going to choose create outside folder, and we can see that when I do this, now we say add track, and now all of my drums are being sent to this group channel. So we've done the routing just like that. So the inside outside folder is if it goes into like our groups folder, like we have an input output channels folder, or if it's outside the folder, it places it directly after the actual last selected track. Now, if you want to add like to groups and to folder tracks simultaneously, there's a macro that's included with Cubase to do this already. So go to edit and go to macros, and it's going to be selected tracks to new folder and add group channel. So now I could come right over here, it just asks us to name it. And as we do this, it'll just automatically create our group track and place all the drums into the folder. So that's all you have to do with that. So just again, to access that macro, go to macros and choose selected tracks to new folder and add group channel. Okay, another question. Is it possible to install or move Cubase libraries and components to another SSD? If so, how and which ones? Will be nice if you have time to get the answer. Thanks again for your great work. Appreciate it. So if you wanted to take all of the content, so Cubase itself isn't that big of a program. It's like 700 megabytes, but the content can be rather large. And we realize that some people, more people have, a few years ago, people would have like a small SSD to run the program and then maybe store all their samples on a different location because the SSDs, when they were kind of new, were, very expensive. But we have a utility called the Steinberg Library Manager, and this is installed once you have Cubase installed. And really all you have to do is you could go through all of your Cubase content, and if you need to move it, just click on Move, and at that point, you could just choose the particular folder that you want to, but you could go to Details, but just select all of the content, and you could just come right over here and just choose to move. And then you could just come right over here and select a new folder. So any of the Groove Agent content, the Hallian content that comes with, comes directly with Cubase, you could just do directly like that. So check out the Steinberg Library Manager, and that's really kind of the intention of that function. All right, so I know we're getting close on time. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. Again, we'll be doing another live stream on Friday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. So just seeing kind of more comments from Marcos about, incorporating 24 channels of IO. So you could definitely do it. Just take the analog outs of your mixer directly in, but just make sure that your mixer, can output to 24 channels. Sometimes mixers can have like an 8-bus or like a stereo out, and you may have to run something like inserts, but make sure your analog mixer is capable of outputting 24 sources. All right, reading through comments. All right, so we have a question. Can you make commands for custom logic editor function save? So anytime that you make your own logical editor function, you save it as a preset, you can come to your key commands and you'll see it under process logical preset or process project logical preset. So anytime you save a preset, it'll automatically show up in that list for you. All right, so we just see a question from Marcos. The Yamaha mixers, they give at least 25% of analog sound, or is it the same using the plugins inside the DAW? So, Yamaha has both analog and digital mixers. So it really depends which mixer you're talking about. So just see from Jeff Sabelski, I wonder if Stevie Wonder ever recorded with Steinberg. So yeah, I mean, he's been a Cubase user for about 29 years since I started. So. All right, so I see that we're just about out of time. I want to just wrap up, and I want to wish everyone to please stay safe and healthy, and we will see everyone on Friday. If you want to email questions in advance, please send them to clubcubase@steinberg.de. If you learned something new, make sure you hit the like button, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that, and we will see everyone on Friday. Thank you for a great hangout. Goodbye.